Well, welcome to this video, and I hope you like it. If you do, click the like button, hit subscribe, and share with a friend. This is going to be a heavy one. I'm going to talk a little bit about cancer and just how hard it is to prove that anything does cause cancer at all. And of course I'm talking about in humans. You'll see it's always the laughable thing, you know. You'll see this product has been found to cause cancer in rats and mice in the state of California. So as long as you're not a rat or a mouse living in California, you're fine. Other than some rather notorious experimentation, primarily by the Imperial Japanese and the Nazis during World War II on humans. Testing things on humans, especially things that are potentially fatal, just aren't really done. So therefore, it's hard to say concretely what something does in humans. The other thing is, as a substitute for humans, they often use rats and mice and other things that have a rather short lifespan. They also, for obvious financial reasons, as far as just the time constraint of getting an answer, you know, there's a difference biologically between chronic exposure over a long period of time and high doses over a short period of time. However, you can't really test for a 70-year lifespan worth of exposure in a human in a short period of time, and also in an animal whose lifespan is a short period of time. You know, lab rats live, I want to say like 2.5 years is like the average maximum lifespan for a lab rat. Some have lived longer, some of them have lived shorter, but I believe that's the average lifespan, the life expectancy. So, you know, cramming 70 years worth of exposure into 2 years, really kind of hard. So the bar's set pretty high. There's probably a lot of things that cause cancer that just will never really be able to experimentally find out. There's also correlation and causation. Correlation is not necessarily causation. I know from a paper I did back when I was in college looking at caffeine, nicotine, and THC. At one point in time, they noticed there was a correlation between coffee consumption and lung cancer. Now this makes sense in hindsight, knowing what I know from going in depth in this paper, because cigarette smokers tend to drink twice as much coffee as non-smokers because nicotine shortens the amount of time that caffeine stays in the body. So therefore, cigarette smokers drink more coffee than non-smokers. So since nicotine, or, you know, cigarettes, not just nicotine, but other things in cigarettes along with the nicotine itself, are carcinogens, there's a correlation with coffee there, but coffee is not the cause. And this is also part of the problem with doing any kind of a study of human populations trying to determine what does or doesn't cause cancer. Smoking causes cancer. Secondhand smoke causes cancer. Every time you're exposed to cigarette smoke increases your risk of cancer. There's also radon gas, which a lot of people don't even know. They've never tested their house, so they don't know if they're exposed to radon gas. Wasn't that big of a deal in old drafty houses, but your more modern houses that tend to hold in the inside air, that are heavily insulated and heavily sealed up, they tend to hold in that radon gas, and that's the second leading cause of lung cancer. So to say that something else definitively causes lung cancer, you have to screen all of the people in the population you're looking at for these other factors. Well, if they worked with, let's use Roundup for an example, if they worked with Roundup and they got cancer, is that because of the Roundup, or is it because of exposure to something else? And there are many things. Alcohol is a carcinogen. The more you drink, the more likely you are to get cancer in places like your stomach. So a lot of these things, they compound on top of each other, but it's also hard to separate things out. Some, the people who use product X tend to have cancer. Do they tend to be at that higher risk of cancer because of the product? Or like the coffee, is there just some other thing going on that makes that correlation? It's real hard to sort out. In places like the CDC and several other places, they publish lists of known carcinogens, probable carcinogens, possible carcinogens, and then just unknown. Because you can't really say that something is 100% safe. Some cancers are caused by infections with various viruses or bacteria. Helicobacter pylori, the one that causes ulcers, can also cause cancer. They've got the whole thing with the commercials for the human papillomavirus, because it potentially causes cancers. Some people have it, never get cancer. Some people have it and it causes cancer. So it's complex. And that's what makes it really, really hard to prove that something causes cancer. If there's a strong correlation between something and cancer, you probably should avoid it. Whether they can legally definitively say that it possibly or probably or definitely causes cancer, probably not a good idea to use it. And this kind of brings it back to the whole thing with Roundup specifically. And I'll post links to the one of the lists of the carcinogens and some of the reasoning on why they considered a probable carcinogen. The studies they did, they looked at the effects it had on cell tissue and some other things. Most of your pesticides being an umbrella term that covers insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, all these sides. Side, just like suicide, homicide means death, killing something. So all of these things that act on a chemical level, I'm drawing a blank on the terminology. There's a Greek or a Latin word I'm drawing a blank on, but basically on a cellular level, we're divided into two groups. There's bacteria and everything else. Bacteria tend to be complicated as far as their metabolism. this other group that includes just about everything else, they tend to be complex as far as forming plants and animals and other things, but there's, on a cellular level, they all tend to work the same way. Other than the ability to photosynthesize on a cellular level, there's not much of anything different between you and a plant. Anything that works on a cellular level as a chemical poison for a plant is bad for you. They say that, the glyphosate, which is the chemical term for the stuff they put in Roundup, is, it works on a mechanism going on in there that isn't the same in humans. But most of the cycles going on in your cells are very similar. So if it causes damage to one life form, there's a good chance it has an effect. Might not normally kill a person or a fungus or something else, but if it works on green plants, it probably has an effect on these other things, because on a cellular level, we are very similar. Roundup or glyphosate is actually some scary stuff. Back when I was a teenager, I worked for a short period of time for a landscaping place, mostly cutting grass, but they also put down weed killer on the cracks in the sidewalk and that, and they bought the contractor variety, the heavy duty Roundup, and they'd mix it. They had the little sprayers, you pump them up so they got some air pressure, and you spray the stuff. And they bought the concentrate. You'd put literally one capful of the stuff into this big tank that holds like a gallon or two of water, and that was enough that you'd spray it on cracks in the sidewalk, and the stuff would basically die before your eyes almost. So I mean, it was just like, wow, this stuff is scary. But yeah, I mean, none of that stuff's generally good for you, and there is information out there on the glyphosate as far as how it works chemically and how it works within a cell on cell material as to why it does cellular damage and therefore is a probable carcinogen. And there are some other studies that were done, some of them are just like population studies, some of them are based on work with lab animals, and they put all this stuff together and say, we can't definitively say it causes cancer in humans, but we're saying it probably does. And you have a lot of other primarily scientific people, especially in the environmental science field, because it's used so widely in controlling invasive plants, are just horrified by this. Because, that's like their magic bullet against, Japanese knotweed and all these other things. You can't get rid of this stuff any other way. You try digging it up, and all the little pieces of the roots, produce other plants, and it's horrible. The only thing that kills it's Roundup, and now you're telling them that Roundup, might be causing people cancer and should either have warning labels or maybe be restricted in its use, if not taken off the market entirely. And they fight you tooth and nail, and you're wearing a tinfoil hat and all this other shit, but the science is out there that kind of backs up that yes, it is. And I don't think that they would have been winning court cases, and those court cases being upheld on appeal, because it is hard to prove that a substance causes cancer. If people are suing Monsanto and winning consistently, because Monsanto's got some deep pockets to pay for a lawyer, if they can consistently be proving that this was causing cancer in a court of law, even though the burden of proof is lesser for a civil case than it is for a criminal case, but still, there's enough proof out there that maybe something's there. And just like going back to the whole cigarette thing, you may have been using Roundup for a while and you haven't had any ill effects, and you may know other people who have used it and haven't had any ill effects, but I mean, almost everybody's walked through some secondhand cigarette smoke, and the people aren't necessarily dropping dead of it either. So and cigarette smoke is a proven carcinogen, so you can't say that, well, cigarettes cause cancer, but there's no way that the glyphosate does, because my own personal experience, it hasn't killed me yet. Well, there's people smoking out there. Just because they're not dead yet doesn't mean it doesn't cause cancer. So I don't know, it's close to home. I know people in my I've lost friends and family to cancer, and mainly from smoking. So I'm going to leave it there, but just trying to give a little bit of a background on carcinogens and how they kind of determine what is and what isn't, and why it's so hard for them to definitively say all the time what is and what isn't, because we can't just take a bunch of orphan babies and inject them with something and then watch them for the rest of their life and see if it kills them. Just ethically not something we do, and that's the most definitive way is actual tests on humans, and we don't do testing on humans for to see what is or isn't fatal. That's just something we don't do, not since World War II and the Nazis and the Japanese, at least. So at any rate, hope it makes you think a little bit, and I'll see you on the next one. Well, I hope you found that video informative. Hopefully it made you think, and please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already, and check out the video that should be appearing somewhere around me here, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.